next presentation, which is from Matt and Nathan at the University of Chicago, preserving email attachments with an attachment converter. And I know you're keen to tell us a little bit more both about yourselves and your project. So turn things over to you, Matt and Nathan.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen to share my slides. Actually, I'll do my whole screen. Okay, my name is Matt. I am programming specialist at the U Chicago Digital Library Development Center, and project manager for this project, which was, well, we'll mention this, but was funded by the EABCC grant. And Nathan?
I'm Nathan. Just finished a PhD at U Chicago, so I'm in a sort of interim period. I'll be starting as an instructor at Boston University, but Matt brought me onto this project, I want to say about a year ago, then sort of on and off developing for it since then.
And I guess, yeah, and looks like Nathan will continue to contribute to it, time permitting, going forward, which we're all very excited about.
Yep.
Okay, so let me introduce you to the basic conceit of the project. Let me see if I can minimize some of my Zoom windows here. There we go, it's a little easier. Okay, and oh, by the way, Nathan, feel free to answer any questions that occur in the chat while I'm doing the presentation part, and then I'll do the same when you do your demo part.
Sure, sounds great.
So what is the motivation for this project? Well, you know, emails come in many varieties, and they don't always have attachments, but when an email has an attachment, the attachment usually is one of the most important pieces of data in the email. It's a piece of data in the form of a file inside of an email. And, you know, as archivists, whenever you're dealing with a file, you have to deal obviously with, like, can you open the file? And although all the file formats we use now are formats that we can open, as you know, as time marches on, many formats sort of fade into obscurity and become more and more difficult to open. So one example I like to point to here, this is an autobiographical example, but when I was in high school, I made a lot of computer animations. They were in Autodesk's FLC format. So if I wanted to watch, you know, one of my animations playback, I'd play my FLC file, and those are actually quite a chore to open now. You have to really sort of dig to get software that can understand the format and open the animation and play. And anyway, that's just one example from my life. You can perhaps, as you're watching this, think of autobiographical examples from your lives of file formats that used to be, you know, totally standard, and now you gotta, you know, move heaven and earth or buy a computer at a garage sale or who knows what to open. So what we want, you know, in the archive space is we want, you know, future researchers, Indiana Jones in the future, when they're going through an email backup, to be able to inspect the attachments in the email, you know, or as many of the attachments as they possibly can. And if they're on a computer system of the future in which we've kind of forgotten how to open that file format, it can be challenging. So the strategy that we pursue at the University of Chicago and more broadly within the archives community is to kind of preemptively convert everything we can convert to a format that the archives and preservation community commits to support long term. You know, there's a sort of list of preservation formats which we think are we kind of have a, you know, our best shot of being able to open arbitrarily far into the future, because we committed to, you know, kind of like not forgetting to maintain the software we used to open it. What we've been working on for, you know, the past few years is a new application called Attachment Converter. And the purpose of Attachment Converter is to do that for file attachments in emails. And this is a project funded by EABCC, since this is an EABCC workshop. Seems like it's worth mentioning. So what does Attachment Converter do? Well, it's the first thing I'll say is that it's an open source application. So that means that it's free to download and install and run on your system. We're not selling it to anybody. What it does is it batch converts all the attachments in a particular email mailbox to preservation formats so that they can theoretically be opened by researchers in the future. It's a command line application, which means that you run it by opening a terminal and typing in the command, kind of, like in the olden days when I was growing up, in Apple IIs and so forth, that kind of a thing. And it runs in a Unix environment. So what that means in terms of can you use it is you can use it if you have a Mac, you can use it on Linux, and then in Windows, you can use it under the Windows Linux subsystem, which Windows now comes with. So if you're able to set up the Windows Linux subsystem, which is a pretty simple process, you can find guides on the internet that will just show you what to click on what, and you basically install an app in the Windows App Store to get that set up, and then that'll open a terminal in which you can type commands, and then you'll be able to run attachment converter from there. So that's the form in which this application exists. You may be wondering, like, okay, so how hardcore of a computer user do you need to be able to use it? At the current phase of development, you do need to be, you need to be willing to open a terminal and run some commands in it that maybe our website instructs you to run to show you how to use it. But I don't think you need any further expertise beyond that to be able to use attachment converter. At least to be able to use attachment converter in its default mode, where it converts a specific list of file formats that it finds in the email collection that you give it. There is an advanced feature, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, that requires like a little bit more hardcore computer skills than that, but not too hardcore, just a little bit more hardcore. And I'll give you a sense of what that is when we talk about that other feature. But in plain vanilla default mode, you basically can run it just by opening up a command prompt on your computer and following some instructions. So what exactly does attachment converter do? It goes through your email mailbox. So the scenario that we are frequently in at the University of Chicago is one where perhaps a professor upon retiring has donated their old hard drives to the university. So that's a very common example, a very common scenario. So let's say whoever, Saunders McLean, Milton Friedman, big fancy professor retires, gives us their old hard drives, and we're going through one of their old email mailboxes, like their inbox, their sent mail, or their drafts, or their spam mailbox. So I give attachment converter one of those mailboxes, like the inbox, and then what it'll do is it'll go through and it'll try to find instances of a file in a format that it knows in advance it's going to want to convert. So for example, like a Word doc, a .doc Word doc file. It'll try to find every doc that's in the mailbox, and then it will convert the doc to some listed preservation formats. In the case of a doc, it'll convert it to plain text and archival PDF. And then the converted attachment, it takes the converted attachment and then puts it back into the original email, so that when you open the original email up again, instead of just seeing one attachment in, let's say, doc format, you will now see the original doc format attachment plus some copies that have been converted to plain text, archival PDF, etc. One thing that we like to sort of stress in talking about how this application works is that we only do non-destructive updates. So that's kind of a fancy term for saying that we never delete anything, we never change anything that you had and like erase old stuff that you had. We just make a new copy of everything. And then so we mainly do that to be safe, but there are other benefits to it as well. We find that if you just make a copy of every change, whenever you make a change, you make a copy, you can always go back to the original. In the case of attachment converter, we actually kind of copy things. We copy the attachments twice, you could say, because within each email, when attachment converter finds an attachment to convert, it places a copy of that original next to the original, back in the original email. But then when you give it a whole mailbox to go through the whole mailbox and look for every attachment it can convert in there, it's going to actually make a copy of the whole mailbox as well. So you'll have two mailboxes on your computer, and the new one will have all the old attachments that it used to have, plus the new converted copies in the emails from which they originated. So just a little quick visual representation of this. If your mailbox that you're running attachment converter on contained an email that looks like this and has, in this example, is a PDF. So this is, we opened it in Apple Mail, if you're wondering what app this is. So opening up a message from Apple Mail, and attachment converter will see a PDF in there. Well, what it'll do in the case of PDF is it will convert the PDF to plain text and then put that plain text back into the original email as an attachment next to the original. And then it'll also convert that sort of generic PDF into an archival PDF, PDF A1B specifically, at least currently. It'll put that back into the email next to the original. And then the purpose of this is that hypothetically, if Indiana Jones of the future has trouble opening archives.pdf in this example, he can then try opening into these other formats to maybe see if he can get more information, recover more of the information that maybe he has trouble viewing in the future. So this is actually fairly common with PDFs because PDFs have such a big and complicated spec, and not every PDF viewer supports every last little feature that could occur in any old PDF. The main reason we do the copying thing instead of the actually changing and deleting thing is for just, a paranoia, to be safe, so that you don't accidentally delete anything that's really important and then lose it. But we also find that this approach is really nice for more general archival principles. So it's good for the archival, best practice of provenance in the sense that the attachment, the converted attachment is in its original context, where it shows who was sending the email and why and who was sent to, and all that information is just there. And so we don't have to record that separately from the converted attachment because the converted attachment is placed in that context. And then it also is very nice from the perspective of the archival principle of original order, because every email has lots of time and date information in it. It has the date at which it was sent. It has a list of all the servers that it went through getting to the recipient, and so on and so forth, and information, and also information about when it was received. Usually we just look at when it was sent, but the point is that all that information about when the attachment is from is also there in the email. So we're sort of piggybacking on all the information that's potentially of interest to historians and archivists that's in the original email itself. We're sort of piggybacking on that by putting the converted attachment back in there. So attachment converter uses the mbox format. So that's if you have a Gmail account and you ask Gmail to give you a copy of your entire mail, that's what it'll give you. It'll give you an mbox. Similarly, if you ask Apple Mail to export your email, it will give you an mbox. So that was the format that we choose to have attachment converter use. If you have an email mailbox that's not mbox that you'd like to do this with, there are various other utilities available that you can use to convert to mbox. And people are curious about that. We could talk about that during the Q&A. But so we chose mbox because it has a lot of really great features. So one basic thing about mbox is it's really old, but it's not old in that it's obsolete and who would ever use it anymore kind of way. It's old in that, well, it's tried and true and it works really well, and that's why it's universal kind of way, which gets the second advantage, which is I think it's really the closest thing we have to a universal email format. I think it's the mailbox that the greatest number of email applications can understand and open. So that's great, and even better from an archives perspective. We often at the University of Chicago like to imagine ourselves in these post-apocalyptic Twilight Zone scenarios where none of the technology we have now is still available, or a very limited subset of it is still available. And if we were in that scenario where we couldn't open anything, well, the mbox is human readable. It's not binary data. So a lot of other formats, like for example, Outlook PST, are binary. It's just a bunch of numbers. It's not meaningful to any human. But an mbox you can just open in a plain vanilla text editor and look at the raw data in the email just as text. which is very nice, I think, because these more, these sort of simple file format encoding, such as ASCII and UTF-8, are, the simpler an encoding is, the more likely it is to be, the more likely future people are going to be able to use it. So it's a future-proofing perk. So that's the input format, also the output format. So another thing to note about attachment converter, possible point of confusion, is that attachment converter doesn't actually do any converting itself. So all the actual converting of, for example, a PDF to an archival PDF, or a doc to plain text, or a docx to archival PDF, all these actual specific, this file turns to this other file conversions, are done by other software that's already installed in your computer, not by attachment converter. So you might be wondering, well, what if I don't have any software that does these conversions installed on my computer? For that scenario, our installation package, which we're working on, it hasn't been released yet, but our installation package will just install a bunch of standard software packages that you can use to convert individual files, so that attachment converter comes ready to go, being able to convert, at least some standard list of formats. So attachment converter doesn't convert anything itself. So the responsibilities of attachment converter specifically are, we're going to go through the mailbox, we're going to find all the attachments that are in format X. Then we're going to call out to other applications that are installed on your machine to do the specific conversions. And then every time one of those applications gives us a file back, we're going to take the file, we're going to put it back into the original email. So it's really the going through the mailbox, finding everything, and then every time it uses another utility to convert something, take the result of that, put it back in the original email. That's what attachment converter does. So we have it set up by default in its kind of out of the box configuration to do the following conversions. We will probably, we're open to suggestions for other ones as well to support. But we thought this was a standard, a nice list of formats to begin with anyway. And it looks like there is a question in the Q&A, but I'll let Nathan take a look at that, and then we'll switch roles. So these are the formats that attachment converter is configured to perform by default. So in other words, whenever it sees a docx in a mailbox you give it, by default, it's going to try to convert it into a PDFA and to plain text. Whenever it sees an XLS spreadsheet, it's going to try to convert it to archival PDF, and then it's also going to try to convert it to tab separated values, which is a plain text spreadsheet format. So that's attachment converter in its default setup. We also are planning to support a more advanced feature. And the advanced feature allows you to set attachment converter up to use other utilities to perform other conversions. So if you happen to have access to, maybe it's like maybe you know someone who's writing a conversion utility, or maybe you yourself are writing conversion utility, or who knows, or you have a hard to get, expensive proprietary utility that costs a lot of money. You can set attachment converter up to do that conversion. Maybe it's another scenario in which this could occur is maybe it's a really esoteric file format that Nathan and I haven't heard of, but you want to be able to have attachment converter also convert that format. So if you want to use this more advanced feature of attachment converter, then there's basically two parts to the process, and this requires a little more computer expertise than the plain vanilla use of the app. But the first thing you do is you tell attachment converter's configuration file what file format to look for, and then where the program that's going to do the conversion is located on your computer. So the configuration file looks essentially like this. I shortened some of the lines with ellipses, but otherwise this is exactly what the config file looks like. And you tell it what format. A format here means MIME type in an email. What format to look for to convert, what format to end up with, and then you give it the path to the application you're going to use to perform the conversion. And then the last thing in this configuration field is like a name for this conversion. We're going to convert this to this relation gets its own section in the config file like this of 4 lines. And then the second thing you need to do is set the configure the externally conversion utility that you want to add to attachment converter. You need to set that up to provide its output in the exact way that attachment converter expects. If any of you watching are Unix people, this means writing a shell script to wrap the conversion utility so that that utility effectively becomes a Unix filter. So if you've never heard of all those computer words, don't worry. You can either, maybe someone in your organization is a system administrator, and if they are, they can help you with this configuration stuff. And if not, you can always just run attachment converter in its default configuration. One other thing you can do is email us, because we're still pretty early days in the project and we love to hear from people. So if you want to email us with suggestions and say, hey, by the way, Matt, maybe you didn't know, but like this great tool exists to convert blah 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 blah. Maybe you could add it to attachment converter. We're super enthusiastic about receiving those suggestions. We're planning to release later this summer. So we've just brought some new interns onto the project, and our focus with our new developers is to try to smooth out the installation packaging side of it. So we're aiming for release later, the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. And you can check out our website, which is located here, if you want to stay up to date on the project. So dldc.lib.uchicago.edu/open. That's open for open source, and then attachment converter. Right now, the website has some basic information which you can use to set the application up on your machine. And the version we have right now, since we're pre-release, is kind of only accessible to software developers. But one of our big projects for this summer is to really just flesh out the installation instructions of the website so that normal computer users can begin using it. So with that, I think I will turn things over to Nathan, who's been our main developer on the project for the past year or so, to do a quick little demo.
Great. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break while I share my screen. Let's see how we're doing. All right, is that all visible?
Looks good.
So what I wanted to go through today in the time that we have left is basically 2 parts. One is actually going through a little bit of the installation. As Matt said, we're working on a easier to use installation process, but even as of now, if you have a little bit of computer savvy, it's not too bad to get everything set up. So I'll go over that. That might be a little bit more computer savvy looking than the next part. The next part will just be a rough demo of what the workflow of working with this tool actually looks like with a little toy mbox that I have sitting around. Okay, so again, our project is open source, so it is available on GitHub. So I'm going to start right from the beginning. The only thing that's not going to be included in this demo is my machine already has the conversion tools that we need. As there's a question in the Q&A. The goal is to have, in the new installation process, look at the dependencies and make sure your machine has the dependencies before or at installation. And again, install them if they're not there. Okay, but if we start here, we can use, for those familiar with Git, we can clone the repository that we have, and this will give us all of the code that we've been working on. To make this a little bit easier, I'm just going to pull this out and put it on my desktop just so that it's all visible. And just in case working with the terminal is not comfortable, basically here we have a way of interfacing with our file system. So here, if I do use the command ls here, this lists all the same things that are in here, and we can use various commands in the terminal to get to various parts of our file system. I'm going to try and minimize the amount of terminal work that I actually end up doing. But once we have the code on our machine, all we have to do, this is a neat little trick if you're a Mac user, there's a services drop-down menu where you can actually open up a terminal at a given folder, so you don't need to know how to navigate through the terminal. But from here, the first thing that we have to do is just run a command called make sandbox. And maybe I can throw it to Matt a little bit to talk about this, but roughly speaking, what make sandbox does is it pulls in all of the dependencies that our project has at the level of OCaml, so that we never run into a problem of, why doesn't this work on my machine, even though it works on this other person's machine? This will pull all the right versions of all of the dependencies of the program of our application. Matt, do you have anything else?
Yeah, so the background to this is that we have the, we just downloaded the source files for the application, and make sandbox is going to install all the things that need to be installed in order to compile the code into a program that you would then run on your machine.
Right. And yeah, so this takes a moment, but it actually isn't so bad. I think we recommend getting a cup of coffee on the website, but it's actually, somewhere like 2 minutes. It'd be a quick cup of coffee.
Yeah. Maybe an instant coffee. Yeah.
Instant coffee. Yeah. Yeah. So, we can take a quick break here. The one dependency in what I'm about to do is that we need a bin folder in our home directory. In order to go to the home directory, there is a drop-down menu here at the top for Finder, which allows you to go to home. And so we're just going to need a bin there, but that's a fairly standard thing in these sorts of systems. And again, this is likely to become obsolete, as Matt said. We're working on better installation processes right now, but this is just to say, if you do want to start playing around with this right now, it's actually not too bad to set up. So per the instructions, we're going to run this command here, eval opam env, which just basically make sure that our current shell environment knows everything that it needs to know. And then we just have one thing that we need to build or need to run, which is make home install. And that's going to build the application, and it's going to put it into the bin. We just saw that this application just popped up in our bin. One thing I did realize that I'm not including here also is that this bin is on my path, which is just to say that when I look for it on the terminal, it knows that it is actually there. So I have a command called which, where I can check where my attachment converter is, and it does actually know what the program that we just compiled and installed. And so we can, for example, test it by using the flag help to look at the manual for the application that we have. Okay, so this was the tech savvy part, but the point is that, like, if you know someone who knows how to do this, or if you have some familiarity with terminal, this is not too bad of a setup. At this point, I do want to go into what the workflow looks like if you're using this as an application, because even that is also quite simple. So I'm going to start by first closing these and opening up the mail application. So in the mail application, I have this very small folder that contains 3 emails. The first is one that I created that has an image and a couple docs. This is one that my friend sent me of a GIF, and here's the email that we saw in the slides that Matt just gave. And so essentially what the workflow is we're going to take this this collection of emails, we're going to export it using Apple Mail. We're then going to use our program to do the conversion, and then we're going to re-import it so that we can look at it and then compare it to the original one that we have. So if you want to export a collection of files or a mailbox on Apple Mail, if you right-click any mailbox that you have and click Export Mailbox, I'm going to put it on my desktop. So quite simple. Let me make a little bit more room on my window here. Okay, and so if we look at what's inside here, we have this table of contents file I'm going to ignore, but we also get an mbox. So I'm going to do the same trick that I did before, open up a terminal at this folder. And again, if we use this command ls, which is basically the list, we can list the things in our folder, like the mbox. And just to point out, as Matt said, the mbox format is human readable. So if we open this up, there, we can ignore sort of all of the metadata and, all of the headers and stuff, but we can kind of see if we squint, here's like, the body of the email that we were just looking at. And here's a bit of metadata about the attachment. And then this is just a big block of data, which represents the actual attachment that was in the email. So just to verify again, if we run this run the program with the help command, it does actually recognize that it's here. And so the only thing that we need to do to run this is we type out the name of the program, and then we direct, using this less than sign, the text in the mbox file. And then we redirect that out to some name that we want our converted mbox to be. So I'm just going to call it converted mbox. And so we're going to get this sort of progress bar that tells us what's happening as it's doing all these conversions. This is something that you will be able to quiet, because likely you'll be running this over a very large inbox over a very long period of time. You might not want all this information, but it's useful to see if you're doing just a small check. For example, we can see that in this first email, we have 3 attachments, the ones that I showed, and then it lists the conversions that we're doing from bitmap to TIFF to PDF to PDFA, to doc to PDFA, and doc to text, along with the other ones that we have. And so in this folder, we should now have the original inbox, the one that we didn't change at all, and then the copy of the inbox, which includes not just the attachments in the original inbox, but also the conversions. And so another nice feature of the fact that we are putting everything next to where it originally was is that you don't need some separate application to view the converted inbox that you've just created. You can just open up Apple Mail again and look at it there. So we sort of get an interface for free. So what we're going to do is within Apple Mail, it's possible to, under File, we can import mailboxes. And we can import mailboxes in the mbox format. And I'm just going to choose the new converted mbox that we just created. And so what Apple Mail will do is create a new mailbox. It'll put in this folder import. And this is going to be exactly the same mailbox that we had before. But if we open up these emails, we'll see that it has the original attachment. And then right next to it, it has the 2 converted attachments. So just to, as a mental check, we can see, okay, here's the PDF, and then we can see in the PDFA version, they changed the font and just to be a little bit safer. And then of course we have the text form, or we can, in the case that we can't open up either, we can still get some information about what was in the PDF. And if we look through the other ones, it'll be the same. We have now 2 copies next to each other. And again, we now have multiple copies. There's a sort of unfortunate feature of Apple Mail that they preview a 1-page document. So the actual way that this looks at the moment is not great, but if you sort of squint, you can kind of see we have 2 pictures. That's what the original and the converted. And, if you look at the actual mbox, you can see what the names of these sorts of things are. You can also view as icon to see how we've changed the names. And even if you take a document and you drag it out to the desktop, you can see the full name after conversion. And so that's all that I wanted to present. It was just to show that this is a fairly simple workflow once you have everything set up, and the setup actually isn't too bad. All right. Thank you. I'll throw it back to Matt in case he has any last things that he wants to say before closing out. But
I don't think so. I think we can open things up to questions. Thank you, Nathan.
perfect.
Great. Well, this is exciting to see. And I was thinking, given the way you have the tool structured as a piece of open source software, command line version of it, it's the kind of thing that I could see, being inserted into an email processing workflow, given the way some of our other tools work, because then it gives you, a range of a way to preserve the attachments without having to modify other parts of your workflow. I did see we have I have a couple of questions, which we might get to in a minute if there's time, but I did see there was one in the Q&A from Nathan about animated GIF, whether that was converted to a still image.
Yeah, that was in fact converted to a still image. That is a matter of what I think we use Pandoc for the conversion of GIF to TIFF. With a different conversion tool, we could get the entire animation, but
yeah,
I actually have to look into. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the TIFF format, what its abilities to encode animations is. I just haven't looked into it. That's a good question though.
Yeah.
It did sound to me as if you had structured the tool in such a way that you could really bring any conversion tool you want into the workflow at any point in time, correct? So if
Yeah.
somebody wanted to
Yes.
use a different tool, they could do that.
Yeah, at the
Yeah.
moment, our primary focus certainly is not the actual conversions, though of course that's an important aspect.
Right.
The hope is as we build this out, we can put better conversion tools in along the way.
Right. And then I see we did have a specific question here from Florian. What tool are you using to do the PDF to PDF-A conversion?
Yeah, so we're currently using two different ones. So you can do it with LibreOffice. And Nathan, I think we had LibreOffice turned on in your demo. Is that right?
No, we're only using.
Oh, we're using PDF too. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Nice. So, that's actually good news. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because LibreOffice is kind of slow. So we've been using LibreOffice, and we've also been using this tool called PDF to Archive, which is another open source. It's basically a really nice interface to Ghostscript, which is very careful to get all the millions of Ghostscript options exactly right to generate archival PDF. So those are the tools we've been working with thus far. If you know of any other open source tools that output PDF-A that we might be able to use, I would love to hear about them.
Yeah, I did just put the link to PDF to Archive on the chat.
Yeah, it's a fascinating project. He goes in on the website. The author goes into the circumstances of the app, which were basically he was a physics master's student, and the university he was at required him to submit his thesis in PDF-A, but provided no way for him to do it. So he actually wrote this application to be able to graduate.
That's
That's what the open source world's about, though. It's teamwork.
Yeah, that's a pretty high bar to get over.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So another good question here, which is more about workflow integration. Would it make sense to first run the attachment converter before, say, processing an EPAD, or the other way around? That may be a chicken and egg sort of question, but just curious for your thoughts about that.
It's a great question. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I suppose if you wanted to take advantage of whatever further information the converted attachments brought to the table, then maybe that would be an argument for doing it before. And this does maybe touch on one topic that's looking ahead to the future. This is very ambitious, and this is for maybe down the road after the project is more established. But in principle, we are really excited about the idea of creating a software library version attachment converter, and what that would allow would allow basically people writing other applications to just sort of use attachment converter inside of their applications without running our full app. So that I think that's something that I'm particularly excited about looking into for the long term. Although it is that is kind of a big ambitious project.
Maybe as a follow-on question, I might ask, relevant to that. Is it the case that when the conversion is run, essentially no change is made to the message to the mbox or EML format of the message, aside from converting the attachments? So everything that comes in the headers, the body of the message, that all stays the same. You're just adding converted versions of the attachment.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was an important part for us,
yes.
making sure that we were, whatever parsing tools that we were using for the emails, they didn't drop any header information after doing the conversion.
Yeah, we did wrestle a bit with some of the email parsing libraries or some email parsing backends we used. Would maybe in places where it wouldn't break the email spec, change around some of the white space formatting of the email, which doesn't matter to whether the email is well formed. And we tried to coax all those libraries into just leaving everything alone.
Right. Yeah, there's a little bit of a related question in here. Do the conversions maintain the original timestamps, et cetera? It sounds.
Oh yeah, I should have shown that. So maybe I can actually pull up
if you want to share your screen and show that. But yes, short answer is yes.
So if we come to the converted mbox, actually what I'll do is just do what I did before here. Let's open up a terminal here, and I'll just open Word inbox. So we can look for attachments by content disposition.
Are you sharing the window, Nathan?
Oh, am I not sharing?
I think you might be showing a specific window, your Apple Mail window.
Oh, yes, you're right. Thank you. Let me share the actual desktop. Right, so we can look at the inbox format for the converted inbox that we have. We can look for the attachments by the content disposition header section in the header for the attachment. And if we look for one of our converted attachments, we do include a bunch of metadata that came from the attachment, what the source type was, what the target type was, that we throw a timestamp in there. This is another one of those things that at the moment, if there's any sort of metadata that anyone would think would be interesting to include in the conversion, we'd be happy to include it, but it's also one of those things that we hope to eventually make configurable, the sort of extra metadata that you add to.
And in case people aren't familiar with email headers, maybe something I could say about this is that these are custom headers that we add to the email, and the average, mail program such as Apple Mail will ignore them. But if you open the inbox and look at the raw email, they're there for you to be able to get information from, such as this timestamp information.
Right.
Looks like we have more questions. Amazing. Ooh, a link. Let's check it out.
Right, and the link that's there is, I have to confess, a little bit of embarrassment here because it's a project in my own institution that Tom is one of my colleagues here. I was not aware of this. I'm just grateful to Tom for sharing that, but looks related. Fantastic. And interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. We will take a look at this.
Okay, well, we have time for maybe one more question. If there's another one out there, please go ahead and raise your hand or put it in chat, or the Q&A, I should say. I see we do have one more about format identification. How do you know exactly what types of versions or files it is, because the content MIME type can cover many versions?
That's right. Yeah, this is a very deep question. There isn't any real way to know. I don't want to be too pessimistic. What attachment converter just looks at the MIME type to tell. There are various utilities out there. The file utility that comes with Unix is a classic one. There are various utilities out there which attempt to guess a file format just by inspecting the data. But because it's sort of the Wild West in terms of what binary information can be in a particular file format, what kind of the best any one of those applications can do is provide a guess. We've explored a little bit the possibility of using some newer tools, which are maybe a little bit smarter at guessing that for attachment converter. But we haven't started using that yet. Anyway, that is something that we're interested in for the future, and having it try to be a little bit more fine-grained in distinguishing file types than just look at the MIME type. Siegfried and Droid, not familiar. I will take a gander.
Yeah, Droid is an interesting tool out of the National Archives in the UK for file format identification that does
interesting.
You were talking about, Matt, where it looks at the actual content in the file as opposed to just the declared MIME type. How it would interact with the tooling you're using to do the conversion would probably be a little bit of an open. So I would assume most of those basically say, we see this MIME type, now we'll convert that. So yeah. Well, great.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say a pretty recent application we were looking at that looked pretty promising was, am I going to be able to remember what it's called? I think it's called Bob. Is that what it's called? I'm going to Google it really quickly. I might be mixing it up with a, I think it was called, but I might be mixing it up with another application by the same author. We actually are using other code by the same author. But anyway, so I may not be able to find the name of the tool right now, but we were looking at one very new tool for this that looked very promising by the author of one of our email parsing backends. So thank you for the suggestions. We will follow up on Siegfried and Droid, and it's always fascinating to look at, to compare the outputs of these sort of guessing tools on different examples. So.
Right, and Tim Gollins, I should say, has noted over chat here that he'd be more than happy to touch base with you about Droid. I know Tim was involved with it extensively, and as he points out, it is used pretty extensively. So value international collaboration.
It's got a decent API that allows you to call it either file by file or bitstream by bitstream, or on an entire file system, and it can output file format IDs. It uses a W3C standard to record the file format ID, and it interacts with the Library of Congress recommended file formats and FADGI work as well.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Thank you.
It's probably one of the biggest. It's probably one of the longest running and biggest collaborations in the digital preservation world. The pronom registry on which it was based was started in 2004, and it releases new file format signatures. It works a little bit like the file utility does, but the signatures are curated internationally and collaboratively to reach so that there's generic agreement and as to how the
right, the heuristics are sort of crowdsourced, you could say.
Yeah, well, it's not heuristics. It's bitstream. It's essentially uses something that's not regex but similar to regex. It has the same expressive power as regex to find characteristic bit patterns in the bit streams, and reports if there's conflicts. It reports conflicts. If there's if it files multiple hits, it reports multiple hits. Yeah, it's quite a sophisticated piece of kit, and it's been under development nationally and internationally in Europe for, as I say, since 2004.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, you'll probably be hearing from us when we look at that.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Matt and Nathan, for joining us today.
Yep. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, everybody.
I hope everyone is having a good time. Our next session will be starting at 4. This is our Ask an Email Archivist session, so please feel free if you want to start jotting down some questions. We're going to have Nick, Greg, and David join us for this session after a quick break. Thank you.